So Tim, why is it that you're doing this translation? What's the purpose?
Let me rephrase your question a little bit. Why, in light of the 50,000 English translations that are available out there today, am I doing this? And that's a good question. And sometimes I ask myself that in the midst of it, in the midst of the challenges and the stretching of it. And I guess I can kind of break it down into two categories: personal reasons and ministry reasons. On the personal level, I'll just start by saying, quoting a Somali proverb. The Somalis, they like to say, "Hubsimo habalasista," which means to know something for certain, somebody would even give up a she-camel. You know, in Somali culture, she-camels are pretty valuable. You know, the milk, and then they give more offspring, and so they're really valuable. And so just that's kind of my personality is, you know, when it comes to the scriptures, obviously the knowledge of God and what He's like is embodied in this text, and it's the most important information that God has entrusted to the human race, and particularly the church. And so I've always been kind of one of those guys that likes to see things for myself, and sometimes that has strengths and weaknesses. But you know, when it comes to something as weighty as the scriptures, you know, to be able to stare at the text and to grapple with what is the Apostle Paul saying here, what is Jesus saying here, what are some of the various nuances the text can have here, and why does one translation go this route, why does another translation go this other route, and trying to get inside the decisions that certain translations make. To me, that process really forces me to grapple with the text. It stretches me, and I really want that process has been, you know, looking back on it now after a couple of years, process I wouldn't trade it for anything. Just the work the Lord's done in my own heart, confronting presuppositions, challenging ideas, helping me to see the scriptures in new and fresh ways, gleaning from the insights of others in the body of Christ who have, whether a translation committee, you know, just the fact that you're reading through the translation, you're gleaning from their insights, or going to the commentaries, things like that. So, you know, first and foremost, just to be able to stare at the text and letting the translation process itself help me to grow in my understanding of the language, and also to force me to grapple with the nuances of a certain turn of argument, or what impact does this the fact that I'm working within this particular genre of the scriptures, how does that impact the way somebody would translate this? And it's just been priceless, just in terms of my own heart. On the ministry side of things, you know, obviously with DTN, we really believe that the hour is urgent, and we've got a number of teachings as to why that conviction is there. But you know, it just seems it's really important for there to be clear teaching from the scriptures, and to be able to make certain things that might not necessarily be available to people that haven't had the opportunity or whatever to study the original languages. That's no reason why some of those insights still can't be made available to them in a way that doesn't make them feel like they're being pushed away from the text because they may not know the language, but that invites them to come explore it in ways that empower them. And so, basically, to integrate those thoughts, those insights into teaching, as the Lord would ask me to maybe teach in different contexts. So that's kind of a personal ministry thing, just to grow as a teacher of the scriptures, to be able to effectively engage other interpretations of certain passages and things like that, and to present my own arguments, my own views in a teaching context in a way that is fair and representative of other viewpoints, but still makes a strong stance on certain things where it needs to be made. So to increase my effectiveness in ministry, I pray that that's the fruit of it, to be a more effective servant of the word. So on also on the ministry side of things, for those who have kind of been through some of the DTN resources on our website, they'll see that worldview is one of our big topics. And those who start to dive into that world will quickly realize that, the worldview you bring to the text affects the way you interpret the text. Some scholars are going to call that a pre-understanding. Others will call it different things. It'll have different nuances depending on which fields and disciplines you're bringing to bear on the concept of worldview. But what you bring to the text does affect it. And what you bring to the text often is derived from the text initially, and then it's a cycle. The Lord teaches you something from the Scriptures, and then you go back to the Scriptures again, and a lot of times you'll take that back to the text, and then He'll give you something else, and then it creates the cycle, and that cycle can be troublesome at sometimes, but if the cycle is leading you to deeper truth, coming from a hunger for truth, then it can bear fruit. And everybody has those pre-understandings and those biases, but obviously our desire is for our worldview to correspond as closely as possible to a biblical worldview, and that gets variously defined. But basically, how would Paul the Apostle, Peter the Apostle, the others, how would they articulate the gospel in light of the worldview that they carried? And so a lot of people that go through our resources at DTN go through some paradigm shifts on the level of worldview, and obviously because translation is affected by that, once in a while, quite often actually, you get some of the emails yourself in the info DTN network, but people interested in saying, hey, do you guys have a translation? And so there's interest in the issue of translation and the relationship to worldview specific to some of the paradigms that we're addressing. So that's another thing. Hopefully, for those who would be interested, this would be fruitful. Just knowing that, bringing the Day of the Lord paradigm to the text as we're interpreting it and translating it. And translation is you can't separate it from interpretation. And so just constantly, the tough thing sometimes is in the body of Christ is we have lots of different interpretations and learning to navigate that world. But the good fruit of some of those conflicts and tensions is that they drive you to the Lord and cause us to cry out, to seek to navigate knowledge in general, but specifically some of these issues in humility and love.